This is African Folktales, and more. A home to beautiful African stories.
Long ago, in a quiet village surrounded by green hills and wide rivers, there was a wise and beloved king named Oba. His people loved him not because of his riches, but because he was fair, generous, and listened to the cries of even the poorest farmer. His queen, Ego, was no different. She treated the people like her own children, comforting widows, advising young women, and helping during harvests. Their palace was open to all, and their kindness made the village flourish. But there was one thing missing in their lives: children. Year after year, Queen Ego prayed to the gods, lit candles at the shrine, and offered sacrifices. Yet, no child came. The king, though sad, never let it break his spirit. He told Ego that they were enough for each other. "The gods will bless us when the time is right," he often said. But 10 years passed, and Queen Ego's heart grew heavier with each season. She loved her husband too much to let him grow old without knowing the joy of fatherhood. One evening, Queen Ego sat by the window watching the moon rise. Her voice trembled when she said, "Oba, I want you to take another wife." The king turned to her in shock. "I will not," he replied. "I love only you." But Ego insisted, even threatening to leave the palace if he refused. She believed it was the only way to preserve the royal line. After many nights of pleading and tears, the king gave in, and a search began for a second wife. That was how Casey, a beautiful maiden from the village, became the king's second wife. She was known for her beauty, skin like polished bronze, eyes like midnight stars. But those who knew her well whispered that her heart wasn't as lovely. Still, the king welcomed her, and Queen Ego, though hurt, showed kindness and grace to her new co-wife. Not long after, both queens became pregnant at the same time. The village erupted in celebration. Drums echoed through the hills. Gifts poured in from all corners of the kingdom. On a beautiful morning, Queen Casey gave birth to a girl, dark-haired and sharp-eyed. That same evening, Queen Ego also gave birth to a girl with gentle eyes and a warm smile. Queen Ego rejoiced and gave thanks to the gods. But Queen Casey frowned in secret. She had hoped that Ego would remain childless forever. The fact that Ego had given birth on the same day, and with so much joy, bittered her heart. The king, unaware of the storm brewing in Casey's heart, declared the day a royal festival. But the bitterness in Casey only grew stronger with time. And when Ego later gave birth to a son, the long-awaited heir to the throne, Casey's jealousy turned to hatred. From that day on, she began planting dangerous seeds in her daughter's heart. Seeds of pride. Seeds of hatred. The daughters of the palace grew under the same sun, ate from the same royal kitchen, and walked the same marbled halls, but they could not have been more different. Princess Adana, Queen Ego's daughter, was known in the village for her gentle ways. She smiled often and listened when people spoke. She greeted the palace guards by name and helped the kitchen staff carry water on hot afternoons. Though she was a princess, she never behaved like she was better than others. Even as a child, she would sit with the orphans in the village square, sharing her fruit and stories. Princess Amara, Queen Casey's daughter, was a different story. From the moment she could walk, her mother whispered into her ears, "You are the only true princess. Do not mix with those who are beneath you." Amara believed every word. She looked down on the village children and sneered at the servants. She refused to wear anything that wasn't new, and if she didn't get her way, she would scream until her mother came running. Casey allowed it all. She defended her daughter even when she was wrong. When Adana offered to braid Amara's hair once, Amara had pulled away and said, "Your hands are not fit to touch me." Queen Ego had heard about it and quietly told her daughter not to mind. "Not all storms are loud," she said. "Sometimes you win by walking away." King Oba watched his daughters grow, proud yet concerned. He loved both girls, but even he could see the difference in their hearts. Still, he hoped time would shape them well. "They are still young," he told his advisors. The fire of youth can be tamed. But as the years passed, Amara's pride only grew, fed by her mother's ambition. She refused to speak to Adana unless spoken to and often made sly comments in front of others. Some daughters are only daughters by luck, she would say. But not every girl is born to be queen. The people in the village began to notice. While they sang praises of Adana, they feared and avoided Amara. Children ran to greet Adana when she came to the market with Queen Ego. But they hid when Amara rode through on her white horse, followed by guards. Casey became more desperate. With no more children of her own, she poured all her hopes into Amara. "You must be queen someday," she said. "Not that other girl." She spoke of alliances, of foreign lands, of the day a prince would come. One quiet afternoon, as the sun rested gently over the palace roof, a messenger arrived on horseback. Dust trailed behind him as he galloped into the courtyard, bearing a scroll sealed with gold wax, the royal emblem of the kingdom of Elam. The guards bowed and took the scroll to King Oba, who sat beneath the talking tree, a place where his fathers once held council. The king broke the seal and read the message aloud. It was from Prince Afani, the only son of King Yugo of Elam, a neighboring land known for its strong warriors and vast gold mines. The letter was respectful and full of praise. Prince Afani had heard of King Oba's wisdom and the beauty of his daughters. He expressed a desire to visit, meet the princesses, and, if fate allowed, choose one as a bride, sealing an alliance between the two kingdoms. King Oba's heart swelled with joy. "This is the will of the gods," he said. "Let us welcome him with honor." That evening, he called a gathering in the royal court. The two queens sat on either side of him as he read the letter aloud again. The room was filled with excitement and whispers of celebration. Queen Ego smiled. "Whoever the prince chooses, may the gods guide his heart," she said sincerely. She turned to her daughter Adana and held her hand. "Remember who you are. Show him your true self, nothing more, nothing less." Queen Casey, on the other hand, said little during the gathering. But inside, she was already planning. That night, as she braided Amara's hair with gold beads, she whispered, "You must win him, my daughter. Smile when you must. Pretend to be kind. Be everything he wants until he says, 'I choose you.'" Amara looked into the mirror and said, "And if he chooses the other girl?" Casey's hands froze. Her voice dropped low and sharp. "Then we make sure he doesn't." Unknown to everyone in the palace, Prince Afani had already arrived, quietly, in the clothes of a common man. He had entered the village with only one trusted guard, who posed as the prince while he posed as a servant. It was a test. He had heard stories about royal pride and hidden hearts. "Let me see them as they truly are," he had told their father. "Not how they behave in front of a crown." And so, the next morning, a young prince dressed in royal blue robes arrived with drums and trumpets, greeted with dancing and cheers. But the real prince, quiet, observant, in plain brown tunic, stood behind him, carrying a bag and a sword, watching every move. Adana smiled at him when she passed in the hallway. She even offered him water when she thought no one was looking. "You must be tired," she said gently. He nodded, silently grateful. Amara, however, brushed past him like he was a fly. When he accidentally stepped in her way near the corridor, she snapped, "Watch where you're going, servant. Next time, you won't walk away so easily." The prince said nothing. But his heart had already begun to decide. The palace brimmed with excitement. Every room was swept, every curtain changed, every dish prepared with extra care. Musicians tuned their instruments and maids whispered guesses about which princess the visiting prince might choose. But none of them knew that the true prince walked among them in plain clothes, eyes sharp and heart cautious. Prince Afani watched closely. He observed how the princesses treated not just him, but everyone. He noticed that Adana always greeted the guards and shared quiet jokes with the kitchen staff. She once even helped a little boy who had spilled water in the corridor, kneeling to clean the mess with her own wrapper. There was no performance in her kindness, she simply was that way. Amara, on the other hand, saved her sweetest smiles for the fake prince, the guard dressed in fine robes. She fluttered her lashes, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and followed him like a shadow. But when she passed the real prince, still believing him a servant, her face twisted with disdain. She gave him orders like he was nothing, once even accusing him of stealing her hairpin when she had dropped it herself. Queen Casey watched her daughter with a proud smirk. She's doing well, she told herself. The prince is surely impressed. She hadn't the slightest idea that the real prince had seen every eye roll, every insult, and every fake gesture. Adana remained herself. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply helped where she could, listened when others spoke, and treated everyone like they mattered. When the fake prince visited the garden with the two princesses, Amara spoke loudly about all the things she would do when she became queen, while Adana quietly fed the birds and let the flowers speak for her. That evening, the real Prince Ifani sat in his room, thoughtful. His guard, the man pretending to be the prince, sat across from him and said, "They don't know who you are yet, but one of them already knows how to treat a king." Prince Ifani nodded slowly. The crown should go to someone who carries kindness in private, not just in front of an audience. Meanwhile, in another corner of the palace, Casey was growing restless. "He is too quiet," she whispered to her daughter. "He has not made a choice. We must do more." She handed Amara a small wrapped package. "It is a charm. Slip it under his pillow. Just in case he is still undecided." Amara hesitated. "But, what if we are caught?" Casey's eyes gleamed. "We won't be. But the gods, as always, see everything. And in a palace built on truth, lies never stay buried for long." The palace glowed with lantern light as drums faded into the evening breeze. After a long day of dances, gifts, and polite conversation, everyone retreated to their chambers. But for Queen Casey and her daughter Amara, the night was not for resting. It was for action. Clutching the small parcel her mother gave her, Amara tiptoed through the corridor, eyes darting from corner to corner. She believed she was doing what any future queen would, securing her crown. But the charm she held wasn't just a token of good luck. It was meant to sway the prince's mind, to cloud his judgment and bend his heart. Queen Casey had gotten it from a woman in the village who claimed it never failed. Amara slipped into the guest chamber, where the false prince lay sleeping, and placed the charm beneath his pillow. She whispered a small chant, just as her mother instructed, and left the room silently. What she didn't know was that the real prince had followed her. From the shadows of the hallway, Prince Ifani watched the entire act. His heart clenched, not just in anger but in disappointment. He had hoped that maybe there was still some good in Amara, something buried beneath her pride. But tonight proved what her heart truly held. The next morning, the palace buzzed with tension. The fake prince claimed he had seen shadows in his room and complained of strange dreams. The king ordered the room to be searched, and there, under the pillow, the charm was found. The guard kept up his role, feigning confusion, but inwardly he and the real prince exchanged a knowing glance. King Oba was troubled. "This is not the kind of welcome I wished for my guest," he said, frowning deeply. He turned to the queens and asked gently, "Is there anything I should know?" Queen Casey said nothing. Her eyes remained on the floor. That same day, Prince Ifani requested a quiet meeting with the king. "Your Majesty," he began, "I believe I have seen all I need to see. But I ask for one more day, just one. Tomorrow evening, I wish to reveal something important. Invite both princesses. Let us dine together." The king agreed. That evening, Prince Ifani sat under the moonlight, watching the stars scatter across the sky. Adana found him there and sat beside him, unaware of who he truly was. She didn't ask questions, didn't try to impress him. She simply said, "The stars are kind tonight. It means something good is coming." He looked at her, quietly moved. Yes, he replied. Something very good. And in his heart, he knew, his search was over. The royal dining hall glittered with gold and candlelight. A feast had been prepared, roasted yam with spicy sauce, peppered goat meat, and bowls of steaming oaf nsala. The air was rich with music and the scent of palm oil and roasted plantains. Everyone took their seats, unaware that the night would not end as it began. The two princesses arrived in fine attire. Amara wore a shimmering blue wrapper laced with silver beads. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the table for signs of the prince's approval. Adana wore a simple yellow gown with tiny white shells at the sleeves. She sat quietly, only lifting her eyes when spoken to. The fake prince, still playing his role, stood up to speak, but the real prince gently raised a hand. All eyes turned to the man everyone had believed to be a servant. I have a confession, he said calmly. My name is Ifani, son of King Hugo of Ilum. I am the real prince. The room froze, servants dropped their trays. Queen Casey's fan slipped from her hand. Amara's smile vanished like morning dew. For a moment, there was only silence, sharp and still. Prince Ifani continued, I came in disguise because I wanted to see your true hearts. He turned to the king. Your Majesty, I found one daughter who offered water to a servant, not knowing he was a prince. Who spoke kindly without knowing I had a crown. And I found another who insulted me, called me a thief, and placed charms beneath a pillow to force love. Gasps rippled across the hall. Amara stood abruptly. That's a lie. But the prince faced her calmly. I saw you with my own eyes. And your heart revealed itself, more loudly than any drum. Queen Casey rose, trembling. You set a trap. No, Prince Ifani replied. I opened a door. You chose how to walk through it. Adana looked down at her hands, too stunned to speak. She had never expected to be chosen, never tried to be. But now, all eyes turned to her with something like awe. Something like respect. King Oba stood, his face unreadable. He walked to his daughters and placed a hand on each shoulder. One day, you will both rule your own households, and perhaps your own lands. But kindness, not beauty, is what holds a kingdom together. He turned to Queen Casey. And you, my queen, have filled your daughter with poison. But poison has no place in this palace. He didn't scream. He simply walked away. Sometimes, silence is the loudest judgment of all. And as the drums started again, soft and cautious, a new chapter began for Princess Adana. The next morning, the palace grounds felt different. Lighter. As though the air itself had been holding its breath and had finally exhaled. Word of the prince's true identity and the reveal had spread throughout the village by dawn. Some villagers laughed in disbelief, others shook their heads. But most were simply glad that the gods had exposed what had long been there. Queen Ego walked through the market that day with Adana beside her. People came out of their homes and shops to greet them. Children followed, giggling and chanting, Kind princess. Kind princess. Adana blushed, unused to the attention. She had never sought praise, only peace. Back at the palace, Queen Casey sat alone in her chambers, her eyes sunken, her fingers tangled in her lap. Amara stood by the window, staring out in silence. Neither spoke. The weight of shame was heavy. Even the servants who once jumped at Casey's voice now moved carefully, as if the air around her might still bite. King Oba sent for both of them. They came, heads bowed. You have both been given much. Yet you tried to take what was not earned. You tried to bend hearts with deceit. He turned to Amara. There is still time to become a better woman. But you must first let go of what your mother planted in you. Casey's lips trembled. My king, I only wanted the best for my daughter. But you chose ambition over wisdom, Oba replied, his tone calm but firm. And you almost led her into ruin. Amara finally spoke, her voice small. Will anyone ever want to marry me now? King Oba looked at her with a sadness that came from love. Someone might, if you become someone worth loving. Change your heart. That is your only crown now. That afternoon, Prince Afani and Adana sat beneath the talking tree. He held her hand, gently, as he asked, "Would you come with me to Alum?" Adana smiled softly. Not as a prize. He smiled back. Never. As a partner. A queen, yes, but also my equal. Queen Ego gave her blessing with joy. The wedding took place days later in both kingdoms, and the people rejoiced, not because a princess became a queen, but because kindness had finally taken its rightful seat beside a throne. As for Queen Casey and Amara, they remained in the palace, not cast out, but no longer feared or adored. With time, and it took many moons, Amara began to help in the village with Queen Ego. She learned to listen. To apologize. To wait her turn. Slowly, the people stopped calling her the wicked princess. Slowly, she began to become someone else. Not perfect. But better, because sometimes, the hardest crown to earn, is a change of heart.